Hello and welcome. What follows is a recording of a meeting of researchers from around the world who are studying the effects of training for improved interoception on health and well-being. I really enjoyed hearing about the similarities and overlaps between their different training programs. Here's a list of the presenters, and timestamps for each presenter are included in the video description below. Please remember to subscribe to the Inner Sense channel for more information on interoception research and ways to explore your own sense of inner body awareness. I hope you enjoy this video.
Thank you for the invitation. I'm Ron Gharbo. I'm a physical medicine rehabilitation physician treating polytrauma, chronic pain, brain injury at Virginia Commonwealth University. It's the hub for the research consortium for the entire military and veterans administration. My passion is about heart rate variability science, the autonomic nervous system, how to modulate it, and the overlap, of course, with today's topic is with interoception.
Thank you very much. And April.
Hi, it's so lovely to be here with you all today. I'm April Smith, and I direct the research on eating disorders and suicidality lab at Auburn University in Alabama. And our lab has gotten really interested in interoception as a mechanism that may facilitate both disordered eating and suicidal behavior, as well as developing accessible interventions to improve interoception.
Thank you very much. Kelly.
Hi, everyone. So excited to be among this group of people. I'm Kelly Mahler. I'm an occupational therapist. I carry an active caseload. So clinically supporting the interoception needs of my clients is a passion of mine. I work primarily in pediatrics and support a lot of neurodivergent children and some adults. And my research is really focused on how to best enhance the interoceptive awareness in my clients.
Excellent, thank you. And Jessica and Lisa joining together.
Hi, my name is Jessica Eccles. I'm a clinical academic psychiatrist at Brighton and Sussex Medical School in the UK. And building on work that my colleague Hugo Critchley has been doing alongside Lisa, who's sitting next to me, I've been running a clinical trial of interoceptive training to improve anxiety in people with a condition called hypermobility. I'm going to pass over to Lisa.
Thank you.
Hi, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Hi, I'm Lisa. I'm a colleague of Jess's. I'm also at Brighton and Sussex Medical School. I am a postdoc with Hugo and Jess, and I have been doing a lot of work on interoception in autistic adults and led a large randomized clinical trial on how to use interoceptive training to improve anxiety.
Thank you. And Jennifer.
Hi, I'm a postdoctoral research fellow at Anglia Ruskin University. An early career researcher, so I've not long finished my PhD. I've been interested in interoception for a long time, so it's the focus of my PhD was looking at interoception and body image. And at the moment, I'm running a series of projects looking at bodily representations in fibromyalgia, including investigations of interoception and fibromyalgia, and an interoception-based virtual reality intervention as well.
Fantastic. So it's really clear that we've all got an interest in helping people who have some kind of need, and the role of body awareness in that is quite clear. The plan for today was to have 6 quick-fire presentations, followed by a little break, and then to move on to a kind of group discussion, the opportunity to kind of brainstorm, to look at any things that are intriguing from what we hear from each other, or any gaps or any opportunities, and then to spend a little bit of time narrowing that down before closing. And if anyone wants to stay on afterwards to talk more, then that's fine as well. It's pretty obvious why we're here, but I just want to say a few words for the reason why I kind of called this meeting and why I've approached some of Jennifer's colleagues, and I'm working with ARU. So, from an academic point of view, I might need to move this bar. Can you all see this screen properly? Good. So if you just type in interoception into PubMed, then it shows you the trend over the last 2 decades of papers that have got the keyword interoception. And this isn't a great comparison, but if you do the same for cognitive behavioral therapy, then you see the trend. There's a kind of leveling off. The axes aren't exactly the same, the y-axis, but it gives you the general idea of the trend. But so clearly, from an academic point of view, there's a big interest in this. Whereas what I'm really interested in is the parts of this which are spilling over into popular culture. And I know we have Kelly Mahler here, who's done an excellent job at helping people understand what interoception means. But, it's creeping over in other ways as well. So this is a New Scientist article. I'm just going to quote from here. It contains a quote from some of Jessica and Lisa's colleagues, including Sarah Garfinkel. So Sarah Garfinkel believes that the time for ignoring the body's role in mental health is well and truly over. Mental health conditions, especially those with some degree of emotional disturbance, have their origin in aberrant interoceptive mechanisms, and any treatment that targets the body has the potential to help these conditions. And Sarah honestly believes that this has the potential for a revolution in mental health treatments. So a big, bold statement. And this year, The Guardian and the Observer supplement of The Guardian, I should say, had an article from Lisa Feldman Barrett calling interoception the hidden sense that shapes well-being. 2 years ago, the front cover of New Scientist had a cover feature on interoception called Your Thinking Body. And then we've had, some famous scientists with their lockdown books published this year that in different ways are pointing to the importance of the body. So Mark Solms, The Hidden Spring, his idea that, linking the free energy principle to homeostasis and how the brainstem, maybe feelings arising from in the brainstem are just as important as the frontal parts of our brain for consciousness. And then we have Anil Seth sort of helping the public understand that all of our conscious experiences happen with, through, and because of a living body. And then Antonio Damasio and his, explaining about the importance of feeling as imaging, visualization and imaging in the feeling aspect. So it feels like, or it seems like, more and more people are trying to kind of take this information out into the public. And Lisa Feldman Barrett making a bold statement that your brain is not for thinking. She's got this great term, body budgeting, which I think is very accessible for people. So I don't want to waste any more time because we're kind of limited for the presentations. And first up will be April. I'm aware that you possibly have to leave.
Okay, can folks see the slides? Okay. I know the 10 minutes is going to go quickly by, so I'll get right to it. Again, thank you so much, Ian, for organizing this really exciting meeting. I'm thrilled to be here with you all today. And I actually did go ahead and cancel my class. I'm scheduled to teach and was going to have to leave early, and shocker, the students were not that upset to miss a class. So I will be able to stay with you all for the full duration, which I'm also delighted about. So I'll be sharing some updates on an interoception intervention we have been developing called Project RISE, which stands for Reconnecting to Internal Sensations and Experiences. And just a quick disclaimer, because this work has been funded by the DoD, I have to note that it does not necessarily represent the views of the United States government. So to give you a brief overview of the training, our training consists of 4 modules that take about 30 to 45 minutes to complete. And we typically deliver them once a week. And so it takes about 4 weeks to complete the intervention. Everything is delivered online, and we suggest that participants complete it on a computer or a tablet. And the modules are self-guided, and they consist of a mix of guided reading, psychoeducation, audio files, and writing prompts. And then there are several optional practice exercises that participants can engage in throughout the intervention, sort of outside of the actual sessions. And so to tell you a little bit about what we provide in each of the 4 sessions, in the first session, we introduce the concept of interoception to participants and note its links with various mental health conditions. We then talk with participants about progressive muscle relaxation, and we actually have them do a guided PMR exercise that takes about 7 minutes. And we thought that was important because it's, kind of a really nice example of bringing attention to every aspect of the body and also focusing on breath. We then introduced the concept of body functionality, which comes from work by Jesse Ayeva, and really this idea that it can be perhaps more helpful to think of our bodies in terms of their function rather than appearance. And so we have participants do some guided written exercises about how their bodies allow them to engage in physical activity and creative endeavors. Then in the second session, I should note, the second, third, and fourth sessions all begin with that progressive muscle relaxation guided exercise. And then the second session's new material is understanding, noticing, and managing emotions. And so we do a review of the function of emotions, as well as really focus in on the associated physiological sensations of emotions, and ask participants to try to work to identify those sensations in their own bodies. And we also do spend a little bit of time talking with participants how to shift emotions if their emotions are associated with ineffective behaviors. Then the third session, we shift back to body functionality, and we review with participants how our bodies can be used to engage in self-care and communication with others. And then participants are also taught skills to take care of themselves and increase communication with others. And then the fourth and final session focuses on being more aware of hunger and fullness sensations by reviewing principles of intuitive eating, and having participants engage in a mindful eating exercise. And then the intervention ends with a kind of summary of each of the modules and the information covered. So that's a really brief overview. If folks have questions, feel free to ask. But I also wanted to share with you in the remaining few minutes a little bit of data that we have on the intervention. So we have now conducted 2 pilot studies, and these are both just simple kind of pre-post uncontrolled studies. The first study was with a small sample of clinical outpatients, most of whom were female, white, young adults. Our primary outcome was treatment acceptability, just assessing whether or not people found the treatment to be acceptable and effective. And then secondary clinical outcomes included, of course, the multidimensional assessment of interoceptive awareness, and then some psychological symptoms like suicidal ideation. The brief symptom inventory assesses depression and anxiety, and then disordered eating. Okay, so in turning to the results for this first study, we did find that, I should take a step back. Our attrition rate in this first study was about 31%. Decent, I think, and pretty in keeping with online interventions. And then we did find that participants found the treatment to be acceptable. And although they rated the effectiveness somewhat lower, it was still above the midpoint. And then in turning to our clinical outcomes, I know this is kind of a lot to take in, so I've tried to highlight that we did see improvements from pre to post test on 2 out of 8 of the MAIA subscales, emotional awareness and self-regulation. And then we also saw significant decreases in suicidal ideation, psychological symptoms, and disordered eating. So that was encouraging. And so we then completed another pilot study. And in the second pilot study, we wanted to see if results might generalize to a non-clinical sample and also a non-Western sample. And so this pilot was actually with 40 university students from India. We have some ongoing collaborations with faculty at Christ University in Bangalore. And here the sample is actually largely male, again, young adults. And we had the same measures, so I won't spend too much time there. And so turning to, again, our results, we did find that participants rated the treatment as acceptable and somewhat effective. And our attrition rate for this study was, again, about 25%, so decent for an online intervention. And then in turning to the pre-post results for this study, we again saw that significant improvements in 2 out of 8 MAIA subscales. Interestingly, they were different subscales that were improving from our prior study. We also, once again, saw improvements in disordered eating and improvements at suicidal ideation reached the level of a trend. And it's possible that, because this was a non-clinical sample, there actually wasn't a lot of suicidal ideation to begin with. And so where we are in terms of next steps is we actually just completed a randomized controlled trial testing Project RISE versus a comparator that we've termed Healthy Habits that was designed to be matched in terms of time, format, and delivery, and focuses on developing healthy personal habits like good hygiene, financial planning, and healthy eating and exercise. And so I do want to acknowledge my collaborator in this, Dr. Whitty. This study was conducted at 2 military installations, JBLM in Tacoma, Washington, and Wright Pat in Dayton, Ohio. And again, we literally just wrapped up data collection, and our data are with our statistician. So I can't share a lot of definitive conclusions, but I did want to share some hot off the presses initial findings to, maybe again spur some conversation later. So for this study, we had almost 200 service members, again, mostly male identified sample, largely white. Most of the sample was active duty, and this sample was a bit older. Similar treatment acceptability measure. We also had our MAIA. We had a number of psychological symptom measures, which in the interest of time, I won't go into. We also had the heartbeat perception test, which I'm guessing most of you are familiar with. I don't have those data yet to present though, so kind of TBD there. And so in terms of, again, just really preliminary findings, I also know I'm running out of time. We had really good retention here. I think part of that could be because of the sample. Military tends to be quite compliant. We also found that the RISE was as well received as our comparator, so that was good. And then I think really excitingly, we are seeing that the RISE group demonstrated improvements in several facets of interoception as assessed by the MAIA, relative to the comparator. And these gains were maintained in most cases at 1 and 3 month follow-up. So I'm just showing MAI noticing, but we did find similar trends for not distracting, not worry, emotion awareness, and self-regulation. And so I know I'm out of time, so I won't really spend too much time on this qualitative feedback, but just thought it was nice to kind of review some of the actual comments the participants had about the intervention. And then finally, I want to thank my fantastic study coordinators and collaborators, and we'll stop there. I think I just went a minute over.
That was really good timing, thank you. And we do have a little bit of buffer time, so no worries about that. Thanks very much, April. We'll move on to Dr. Jessica Eccles. And just so you know, I'm going to put a timer on for 9 minutes. So when you hear a tinkling in the background, that's 9 minutes. But we're not, don't need to be super strict on time. Okay, so passing over to you, Jessica. You should be able to see screen share.
Hi, can everyone see the slides and hear me? Oh, no.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to talk to you about a trial that we did that combines interoceptive training with CBT in people with hypermobility and anxiety, called the ADAPT trial. And these are my dear colleagues and collaborators who have been involved in this study. Basically, the scientific basis of this came from some work in hypermobility and anxiety that suggests there was a mismatch between what hypermobile anxious participants thought was happening to their heartbeats as they stood up and what was happening to their heartbeats as they stood up, which is a phenomena related to orthostatic intolerance, which is very common in hypermobility and is sometimes manifest as postural tachycardia syndrome. So we found that this mismatch that we labeled autonomic prediction error, in fact, mediated the association between anterior insular activity and anxiety level. So we thought, how can we target this autonomic error? And what we thought was perhaps combining interoceptive training in a way that Lisa is going to talk to you about later. So improving heartbeat tracking perception and heartbeat discrimination perception, but at the same time, so not only promoting interoceptive accuracy and awareness, but reducing interoceptive sensibility by trying to decatastrophize internal bodily sensations through CBT approaches. So that is the fundamentals of ADAPT, to combine the two, and it stands for altering dynamics of autonomic processing therapy. And you can read the trial protocol that was published in Trials. Now, of course, slight hiccup with the trial protocol in that we were due to randomize our first participant in March 2020. This had been conceived as a lab-based project that people would come in and have the interoceptive training through a pulse oximeter connected to a computer running MATLAB. This, of course, was not possible during COVID restrictions, but I will talk how we got around that in quite a creative way. Generally speaking, our inclusion criteria were to be adults with hypermobility, anxious, but no other significant psychiatric difficulties apart from depression, and not undergoing another therapy, and on a stable dose of medication. I'm actually going to leave this for a second and come back to it. This is quite a complicated slide, but it is, we compared ADAPT, which had a different protocol for different types of anxiety as specified by the Mini. So they generally had 45 minutes of interoceptive training and 45 minutes of CBT. And as you can see, there were in fact 5 interoceptive training sessions over 8 weeks, each of them 45 minutes as part of an hour-and-a-half therapy that was combined with the CBT that you can see out here, that was compared to something called emotion-focused supported counselling, which was also an hour-and-a-half, and both arms were delivered by a clinical psychologist. To get into this is just the assessment paradigm in terms of what we were measuring. Our primary outcome was anxiety, as measured by the Beck Anxiety Inventory. But the real problem was how do we do interoceptive training in people's homes during COVID without bringing them into the lab. And Hugo Critchley has an existing collaboration with a software company, and we were able to pretty rapidly make a appified version of the interoceptive training called HeartRater, which used a tablet with a USB connection to a known pulse oximeter to deliver the interoceptive assessments and training. So I'm just going to very quickly show you. So you need a tablet. This is also a bit of a problem because the tablet's only got one port. You need a tablet charger because it's very intense. It drains it very quickly. USB-C connector, a pulse oximeter, and then a sensor either on the finger or the ear, which is similar to what you'd need in the lab, but in the lab it's all set up. So we made up this kit. We sent it out to participants' homes. And the therapy was conducted over Zoom with a lot of guidance, the software included both heartbeat tracking and heartbeat discrimination, as you can see here, assessment and training, it's guided by this. It's intended to actually be completely self-guided, but this was guided by a therapist. So the software will tell you what to do, and the participant puts in how many heartbeats they had, and then there is a confidence judgment for measuring interoceptive awareness, which actually has a set point in the middle, and then you slide it around on the tablet. So maybe that's interesting in terms of biases. They did heartbeat tracking, and then heartbeat discrimination, 26 trials. And then this was assessed at baseline, midpoint, and end. But during the therapy, they had interoceptive training, and I'm just going to show you the training protocol. So you do a run of tracking, a run of discrimination, and then some kind of activity that will raise your heart rate. Now this is speaks actually to some others work here, in that we're dealing with the participants hypermobile. Some of them have chronic pain and fatigue. You have to be careful about getting the right level of activity and exercise. But so you do the tracking, the discrimination, physical exercise, or some kind of exercise tailored to the participant, and then tracking and discrimination again. This is all being sent to a server, and then we are able to, so please take a minute or two to perform some light exercise, for example, star jumps or running on the spot. Click start when you're ready to proceed. So this actually worked out. This was a big risk and a big challenge, but there was nothing else we could do during COVID. And we actually found that participants generally could use it pretty well. We had to install an app on the tablets called Mirador, so that we could control the tablets and make sure that people didn't interfere with the software. And we posted everything to the participants, and in general, people sent them back. We arranged for collection as well. So the other thing that was a bit different to the lab setup was, in the lab, people were indicating confidence by hand. This was a slider that started at 50, perhaps more reliable. Now here you can hopefully see our consort diagram, which showed that we aimed we aimed initially to have 40 in each arm, but because of the financial restrictions of COVID and having had to spend so much time converting to an app, we only had the money to pay for our clinical psychologists for to complete 40 participants, 21 randomized to adapt and 20 to emotion focus. We used sealed envelope, and they were remarkably matched on all baseline measures. We actually had to exclude quite a few participants because many of them were actually neurodivergent, which is a whole other line of inquiry that is coming off this research. But as you can see, we had excellent retention rates, in that we only had one person who did not complete therapy, and that person didn't start therapy after randomization because they caught COVID. I think this was a combination of the clinical psychologist and the excellent research assistant. However, there were some issues in that there were quite a lot of sense errors. Hypermobile participants can have poor circulation due to Raynaud's. And I think this makes any light-based interoceptive sensing technology difficult. But I just wanted to show you, you can see how beautifully matched at the beginning our participants were so the blue line is ADAPT and the red line is emotion focused in terms of their interoceptive awareness. And then how ADAPT improved interoceptive awareness. And this graph I should have perhaps flipped the other way around, but you can see that as interoceptive awareness improves in ADAPT, anxiety reduces. Now, overall, ADAPT did not outperform the comparator, but it seems that the mechanisms of anxiety reduction are different in ADAPT compared to emotion focused. Emotion focused seemed to be more about the rapport with the therapist, and ADAPT seemed to be more, the change in anxiety seemed to be driven by the change in interoceptive awareness. So these are really interesting findings. Oh, I did have a table with the outcome measures, but yes, it improved pre-post. There was a significant reduction in anxiety and a significant increase in various interoceptive measures. So we were really pleased to have been able to do this during COVID, not quite how we liked, but it shows that it's possible to take it out to people's homes. And Lisa and I and Hugo are looking at ways of taking this forward in the future.
Thank you so much. Very interesting. And hopefully if you have questions or comments, just sort of jotting them down so we can raise those later. I'm going to pass on to Dr. Ron Gharbo.
So there's my chapter in the clinics in North America of the things I believe. They fall quite in line with all of you. I wasn't quite sure the audience, but I like the term afferent training, meaning, Western world, we're doers without listening. And I like to bridge the East-West divide, that it's doing and listening at the same time. I like to keep in mind that the right insulin does several things. It modulates pain, heart awareness, and other people's pain, also known as empathy. And that the brain has a default mode to persistent sympathetic activation. That could be, you could fall into that by PTSD, concussion, persistent worrying. There's dozens and dozens of modern ways to get stuck into persistent sympathetic activation. I believe the pain catastrophizing scale is an excellent tool, and it has 3 elements. And I believe there are a couple of real keys in there. It's really helplessness that drives the dollars, and obviously the suffering. And I think it's the rumination. So I like to look at PTSD. It's not the triggering, it's not the intrusive thought as much as it is the physiological consequences of the ruminations. So the results were just presented last week this was on veterans. I threw this slide in for you, Ian, after the things the comments you made about CBT. I thought you might like this. In 2003, they basically said, we've done enough CBT research on CBT alone. It's time to come up with better theory to generate change. And I like everything. Mine is an energy-based model, so that CBT overthinking could be exhausting, and that mobile sensing technologies could view the way we change. This is a case report sort of outlining how it would be done with a patient based on our study. I want you to note that heart rate variability is a measure of parasympathetic function. It's depressed by both anxiety, chronic pain, and a dozen other things. And there's a bidirectional relationship. And I believe fear ruminations is what keeps us in that vicious cycle that has a cascade of consequences. So heart rate variability and inducing resonant frequency breathing includes HRV. It's very complex, but basically you see heartbeats here, and the amplitude between the slowest and the fastest heartbeats changes. The longer and the bigger and the more efficient your diaphragmatic breathing is. and it can also be modulated with your thoughts. So this is large HRV, creates a sinusoidal rhythm, and then you can write incredible software off of that sinusoidal rhythm. So we had two populations, and one of the scales we used was the pain catastrophizing scale. The treatment group had an M-Wave 2 handheld biofeedback device, and the randomized, the sham group got a squeeze ball, and they were randomized into two groups, and they had 6 one-hour sessions. The sham control sat there, look at pretty pictures with nice music, and then they were sent home with a stress ball to practice with the stress ball. Whereas the treatment group was taught heart rate variability biofeedback to physiologically shift their emotions. And I'll go into that in just a moment. And then follow-up check. So these are my colleagues' slides. I did not realize that they did that. Okay, great. So we checked their heart rate variability. We did all those various metrics, and they had one-on-one treatment. So this is the heart rate variability calculation that was used. And we did wrist actigraphy and several other metrics. But this is the big slide. And what this tells us is at baseline, their HRV was comparable. And after 6 one-hour training sessions compared to sitting and looking at pretty pictures and using a squeeze ball at home, they did not learn anything physiologically. Whereas the treatment group learned how to modulate their autonomic nervous system real time with their diaphragm and their thoughts. And the way that was done was you can initially get somebody to breathe 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out to initiate resonance frequency, and then incorporate a positive or emotion. In my clinic, I don't talk about positive and negative emotions. I talk about feeling gratitude, the difference between remembering gratitude and feeling gratitude, and learning how to feel that shift. And that using your hand, if you remember your sensory homunculus, your hand is this big sensor, and maybe you could, with practice over time at home, learn how to do that shift with your hand and later go without the device. That's how I do it in the clinic. In the study, they're just taught to turn this device from red to green with their diaphragm and their thoughts. What I find particularly powerful, 2 months later, the sham group still did not learn a physiological skill. They had them come back, and to each group said, just do what we had you do before. That was the only instruction. And the group still had this physiological skill. So there is a measure of durability. It's an acquired skill built off of practice to shift emotion physiologically. And if you have PTSD, you have to sit bravely with your thoughts. I talk about use your diaphragm as a shield before you start dealing with those intrusive thoughts, and physiologically defuel the energy associated with that. So getting back to what you said, Ian, about the free energy principle, I simplify that even further. And the rule for my patients is energy is finite. And I tell them I'm going to quiz them. You always have to remember the 2 and 20 rule. Your brain is 2% of body weight and can burn 20 or more percent of the available carbohydrates. Now, are you going to make your energy decisions? And I want you to be incredibly skilled at defueling your physiology. As far as pain catastrophizing, we did see also clinical significance with a reduction in pain magnification in the pain catastrophizing scale. So that those are the main findings, along with some of the things I've heard from my esteemed colleagues here, which I think we're all on the same page. We do see a high number of hypermobility patients. I personally make a personal recommendation of Tai Chi or Qigong. they don't need the flexibility associated with yoga, but I want them connecting, doing and listening while moving at the same time. So I believe that moment to moment awareness with movement is an excellent thing with these hypermobility patients, which that ironically, they're judged as weak. However, they're typically over triers. They're trying too hard and not paying attention and dislocate their hips and things like that. So I'm a big proponent of Tai Chi for those patients. And then I think we're moving towards, I personally like acceptance-based therapies. Cognitive behavioral therapy has actually absolutely changed a lot of lives, but it's time to move forward. And I believe in learning the breathing skill, becoming very good at that. And then also, there's nothing better written than the serenity prayer of accepting what you have to accept, including that energy is finite, and then making proper, healthy, energetic decisions off of that. And one other tidbit I'd like to say is with your renounced patients, you probably could do a PPG with earlobe monitor as opposed to a finger monitor. That's a potential option. But I'm happy to take questions now or later.
Thank you so much, Ron. I think we'll continue before the questions, but that was excellent, as have all the previous speakers been excellent. Moving on to Kelly Mahler from the Interoception curriculum.
So I just wanted to zoom in on one of our intervention-based studies that we've done. We've done 5 studies that are complete, and we have 2 in progress that are all focused on measuring the outcomes of something called the Interoception curriculum, which I promised to spend a lot of time on per your instructions, Ian. So I'm going to talk about study 3 just because this is where we're currently writing this study up, so it's kind of fresh in my mind. But we looked at the impact of the Interoception curriculum on emotion regulation in children. And this was kind of like testing the waters, like, can we even do this? So it was an uncontrolled 1-group pre-test, post-test design. One of our studies in progress right now is going to have a control group. So the way this research worked, we put a message out on social media looking for pediatric occupational therapists that were either working in an outpatient or a school-based setting, and that they had access to a caseload that met our inclusion criteria. So we were really looking for therapists that were supporting children anywhere between the ages of 5 to 18 years old, and they had some form of a sensory processing difference. So we enrolled the first 17 sites that completed and turned in all the paperwork. We got hundreds of emails of people wanting to participate in this study. So people know about interoception. They're really excited about the promise of this, of all of the work that we're all doing. So we had 17 sites from 4 different countries, including US, UK, Canada, and Australia. We had a mix of outpatient clinics as well as schools. And so we enrolled 182 children originally, but did not finish with 182 complete data sets. So the staff that were enrolled, the OT had to be at least a part of the team. They did not have to be the lead person implementing the intervention. Anyone that was leading the intervention had to participate in weekly virtual trainings. We collected data using the interoceptive awareness interview, which is part of the comprehensive assessment of IA. We really struggle with interoception measures in our population. We are working in peds and many times have neurodivergent pediatric clients. And so many of the widely available tools are not a match for the clients that, or the participants that are enrolled. We also, to measure emotion regulation outcomes, we use the BRIEF-2, which is a really widely used measure. And we focused in on the emotion regulation subtest. So the caregiver I should say the caregiver was defined. They were the one that completed the brief too. The caregiver was a school staff person if that participant was receiving the intervention in school, and it was the parent or a home caregiver if they were receiving the intervention in an outpatient clinic. So what did our intervention look like? It was an 8-week condensed version from the Interoception curriculum. The Interoception curriculum in its entirety is 25 lessons or modules long. It's divided into 3 sections. So section 1 is all about the body and building the learner's ability to notice their body signals. And then section 2 of the curriculum is all about emotion and helping the learner. So now they're noticing these sensations or body signals. What do they mean for them? So helping them make that connection between their body signal and the emotion. And then finally is the action piece. And that's helping the learners connect to feel-good actions that promote comfort and regulation within their bodies. And they're much more equipped to do so with enhanced knowledge about their bodies and their body sensations. So in this particular study, each child participated in a weekly lesson. It ranged anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes. The reason why it was such a variance, each child received the same protocol, which I'll show you next, but sometimes some children needed a little bit more time to process and other children could zoom through it a little bit quicker. So really that time frame was up to the child and it was child driven. Each of the lessons focused on noticing sensations within 1 to 2 body parts. So for example, week 1, the child was doing a lot of activities focused on learning about the different ways their hands can feel and their feet can feel. So really focusing on those interoceptive sensations. We started in outside body parts first, and then we worked our way in to noticing the different ways your heart can feel, your lungs can feel, your stomach can feel, your bladder can feel, and so forth. And we really found through a lot of trial and error for children that they tend to succeed a lot more with noticing those interoceptive sensations on outside body parts first because they're more concrete, they're less abstract, and then we move internally to notice those internal interoceptive sensations. So this is just an overview of the 15 different body parts that we covered in this particular study. And I didn't put them in order, I'm sorry, but we start with the outside body parts. So some weeks they were covering 2 body parts and learning about 2 different body parts, and other weeks we had 1. So each lesson contained 2 main strategies. So we had something called a descriptor menu, and that's a menu of words that the child could use to describe the way that body part felt. And then we have the other strategy, which are called focus area experiments. And these are experiments designed to evoke a stronger feeling in that particular body part to help capture that child's attention and give them practice noticing and describing their sensations. So just like playful things that we did, like putting your hands in cool water or warm water, putting lotion on your hands, shaking your hands. And so the children were invited to participate in these experiments, and they could use the descriptor menu if they wanted to help them to find a word to describe what it is that they noticed. However, we really encourage their own words and their own unique way of describing what it was they were experiencing. And we heard so many really cool ways of describing their interoceptive experience. Then in between the lessons, the only thing that we asked the caregivers to do, whether it was school staff or home caregivers, was to complete a body check chart with each of the participants. And a body check chart is in a file folder, and it has icons. There's an example on the screen that has the red folder. It has a blank body outline on the one side, and then there's hand icons on the left side. And each of those hand icons has a descriptor word that child saw on the descriptor menu during the lesson. So for example, your hands can feel cold, warm, tight, loose, slow, fast. And we ask them in that moment to think about, notice how their hands are feeling, and then move the icon that matched what they were feeling over into the body outline. So it's really a slow down, as structured as possible version of a body scan. It's just manipulative. It helped the students or the participants really slow down and think about the way their bodies were feeling. So as we progressed through the lessons, we added more and more body part icons to the body check. So by the end of the intervention, they were checking in with 15 different body parts, but it was a gradual, slow build to noticing how their entire body was feeling. So we ended up with 107 final participants. We found that therapists are really bad at collecting data. That was a surprising finding. That's not in our paper. Lots of very spotty data collection. We had our mean average age, or our mean age was at 10.1 years. We had 54 participants that did have a primary diagnosis of autism, but 53 had other diagnoses, including attention disorders, anxiety disorders, sensory processing disorder, and coordination disorders. We had statistically significant outcomes in both interoceptive awareness, but probably most importantly, emotion regulation, according to the brief too. And none of our variables individually really explained any variance at a statistically significant level. So there was no differences in gender, diagnoses, age, the site that the intervention was received. And so I don't know why that's there, but that's it. I hope I was within my time limit. So yeah, we have a lot of future directions to go.
Fantastic. So nice to hear all these different approaches and different and the similarities as well, the overlaps, which we'll be talking about in a little while. Passing over to Dr. Lisa Quadt.
All right, so we were much luckier than Jess in that we had finished our last participants just as lockdown hit. And we're able to finish our trial, which was called Aligning Dimensions of Interoceptive Experience in Autistic Adults, or AD for short. And I just want to quickly say something about the language I'm going to be using. So I will be using identity-first language. So I will say autistic person or neurodivergent person instead of person-first language. So person with autism. I will not say that. And we are trying to move away from the traditional deficit-based model of autism and trying to focus on their own strengths and characteristics instead of always comparing them to the neurotypical and framing it all in deficits. And we have two really brilliant papers that we use for this. So this is one by autistic autism researchers, where they give really good practical suggestions for autism researchers on how to avoid ableist language. And then this paper from 2016 showed that 85% of autistic people in the UK that they asked preferred identity-first language. So this is the guideline that we're following. Just a very quick background on the trial and how it came to be. So we know that there are different dimensions of interoception. We can measure how sensible people are to their inner sensations, and then we can do these heartbeat detection tests, for example, to measure their behavioral accuracy. And these different dimensions can go in either direction. They're not necessarily aligned. And what my wonderful colleagues found in 2015 is that when they asked autistic people and a comparison group to do the body perception questionnaire as a measure of sensibility and then the accuracy task, they found that autistic people tended to be much less accurate, but much more sensible, whereas the control group or the comparison group tended to be more accurate, but less sensible. And from that mismatch, what was then done was to calculate what we called an interoceptive error signal. And what you can see here is what led to the trial, that we see that the higher or the bigger this mismatch or this error signal got, that predicted anxiety. So the higher the anxiety got, So the thought behind the trial that we did is that if we can align these dimensions of interoception again, we might be able to also decrease anxiety in autistic. So that was the motivation behind the trial. And we had 121 autistic adults who were between 18 and 64 years old. We had more female assigned at birth than male assigned at birth, which is quite a novelty in autism research often. Most of our participants were verbal. We only had some who only spoke few words. Most were able to travel up to 8 times to the location of the study at the university. We screened them for anxiety and co-occurring conditions like ADHD, depression, PTSD, but we only excluded those with neurological conditions like epilepsy and ongoing psychotic experience. But otherwise, the study was quite open to those who were able to come to us for all these sessions, either alone or with someone to. And then at the baseline assessment that everyone did, we asked them to do the heartbeat tracking task and the heartbeat discrimination task, then the measure of interoceptive sensibility, the body perception questionnaire, and the state trait anxiety inventory, the STI. And then after that baseline assessment, they were randomized into 2 groups, so either to receive the AD interoceptive training or a control, an active control, which we call the prosody training. And I will explain both of those in a second. And in either of those groups, participants received 6 training sessions over 3 to 6 weeks. So we did try to make it as comfortable for them as possible and to fit in with their lives. So we asked them to come in at least once a week, but some came in 2 times a week. I think we had a few who came in even 3 times a week, but usually it was between 3 and 6 weeks that they completed their sessions. And I think I have to share the sound now, so give me a second. All right, so for the interoceptive training, we asked our participants to do the same tasks that they did in the baseline assessment, but this time they got feedback from the experimenter. So what Jess described of people doing at home with a pulse oximeter, we were lucky enough to do in our actual lab in front of a computer. The participant had a pulse oximeter either on their finger or their earlobe, depending on what gave us the better signal. And when they did the heartbeat tracking task, we asked them to tell us how many heartbeats they counted, and then we would give them accurate feedback. So if they counted 24, they would be told, yes, that's right, or actually you were a bit off, it was 36, or whatever it was. And then for the heartbeat discrimination task, where they have to tell us whether the 10 beeps they hear are at the same time as their heartbeat or in between heartbeats, again, we would give them accurate feedback on whether they were right or wrong. So that was the first block of 1 training session. And then we asked them to do some light exercise, whatever they were able to do and comfortable to do until they felt their heartbeat somewhere in their body. So just 1 to 3 minutes. Some chose to jog around the building. We have a hill right up there, so that was quite handy. People like to walk up and down the hill, run up and down the stairs in our buildings, do jumping jacks. We had an exercise bike. So whatever they were comfortable to do until they felt their heart somewhere in their body. And then we would repeat the same block again. We asked them to do the interoception tasks and provided them with feedback. So there was 1 session, and they did 6 of these sessions over the course of 3 to 6. And then the active control was something called prosody training. So we showed them several pictures, and then they heard something. I will try and play this for you. You will have to nod if you can hear it.
What's all this?
Did you hear that? Okay, so you heard this one sentence. The content of the sentence didn't matter, but then you had to choose, was this a disgusted voice or a happy voice? And if you chose the disgusted voice, you get feedback and saying that's correct, well done, or that was wrong, and then you would see which emotion it was actually, and then that would go on for 6 sessions. So that was the control condition, which was also kind of focused on emotions, but at an exteroceptive level. And then after these 6 weeks, 3 to 6 weeks of training were done, everyone came back for a post-intervention assessment, and then our primary endpoint was a 3-month post-intervention assessment. And then for just some headline results, we did find that when we compared at the primary endpoint of 3 months of primary outcome, which was a trait anxiety measure, that the AD group did decrease their anxiety significantly more than the control group. So our group, unfortunately, wasn't perfectly matched at the beginning, but obviously the baseline score was in the statistical model, and we saw a small to moderate effect of AD on trait anxiety in autistic participants. So that was very nice. And then when we looked at sensibility, so the body perception questionnaire, which importantly doesn't focus on heartbeats, it focuses on the entire body. We also saw that this kind of oversensitivity decreased in the AD group, but not the comparison group, which is really interesting because it might show us that even just training this one cardiac channel applies to the whole of the body and might decrease overwhelm from other internal signals. So that was really interesting. And then in terms of accuracy, you can see here just how massively they improved, obviously because they got training and the control group didn't. So the control group on the tracking accuracy went from below chance to just at the chance level, and even decreased a bit in the discrimination task. Probably, they might have improved because they have done the task before in one of their assessments, but we see like this significant, very large increase in the AD group. So they were able to improve their interoceptive behavioral accuracy. So just to quickly summarize, I have 10 seconds left. I see, we wanted to know, does improved interoceptive accuracy reduce anxiety symptoms by aligning these dimensions of accuracy and sensibility? We did see the small, moderate effect of AD on trait anxiety, and we saw these larger effects on sensibility and behavioral accuracy. This leads us to believe that the changes in interoceptive abilities do lead to decreased trait anxiety in autistic adults. And we did have some limitations. We had a self-selecting sample. As I said, they had to be able to come to us. They had to be able to fill out all of the measures. So it was not very representative of the entire autism spectrum. Because of how the interventions were, neither the researchers nor participants were blind to allocation, but those who did the assessments with the participants did not know which intervention they got. And there's some controversy around interoception tasks that you're probably all aware of. And that's it for me. Thank you to everyone who was involved in the study, and thank you for having me here.
Thank you so much, Lisa. We'll have a break after I present. So sharing my screen. Our study was funded or supported by a small pot of money that was made available to the local authority of Cambridgeshire, and it linked businesses, which I represent, with academia. So I was teamed up with Dr. Jane Aspel from Anglia Ruskin University, and we the funding actually paid for an intern, which came in the form of a research assistant for 8 weeks to help design and form the concept behind the interoception training. So it consisted of an online program, 8-week online program, and it was all delivered by videos, sort of YouTube style videos, and they were presented on a platform called LearnDash, which presents the videos in a kind of course style. And each week, 3 to 4 short videos were released with a total of 45 minutes. So each video was about 10 or 15 minutes, and they could be watched and listened to whenever they wanted during that week. There were also optional live weekly sessions via Zoom, where the participants could ask questions, and we reviewed the information from that week, and also invited people to join a group body awareness interoceptive based practice. The participants also had access to an exercise library. So this was different body-focused exercises, and they could practice them over and above the core videos for each week. So yeah, these are just some of the screenshots from the videos they saw. So each week within the videos, there were 3 types of learning. So I'm going to use the word didactic. So the first type was just facts and figures, giving people a plausible, up-to-date scientific explanation of how bodily sensations arise and how these might relate to everyday challenges. And the second type of learning was the experiential exercises themselves. So body scans and so on that I'll talk about in a moment. And then finally, there was some self-inquiry questions, so optional questions. They didn't have to submit their answers. They could just reflect on them throughout the week. And it was a chance to combine, what they'd learned about from the biological explanation of bodily sensations with what they'd experienced during the interoceptive exercises. And the premise we presented to people was that by improving their connection to their body, they could have an opportunity to create a little bit of space between this single experience we normally have of our thoughts, our internal bodily sensations, and the external environment. They often feel like they're all one thing, but by using interoception as an access point, they can kind of untangle those. So I should point out that this was a kind of feasibility study or pilot study, in that we wanted to just see if it was possible to deliver this type of training, what the results were. We didn't have a control group. So in each week, there was a different theme, and they were all based around the idea of change. And they kind of guided the participants through a journey. Each week introduced a different topic, ranging from sort of the concept of neuroplasticity, homeostasis, allostasis, predictive processing, and different aspects of metacognition and so on. But they're presented in a very kind of accessible way. So we avoided too much jargon, but dropped in the odd word here or there, but then used other concepts like the idea of body budgeting, and people were able to do further reading as well if they wanted to. So these are just a few of the, how we simplified things to explain the autonomic nervous system, for example. The idea that information is relayed around the body in a two is bidirectional, and that it's possible for these feedback loops to create maladaptive vicious cycles. But the aim for what we were working towards was to kind of reverse that and to influence their physiology in a way that is helpful to their lives. So that was the kind of facts and figures. And then the experiential exercises, we sort of, at the beginning of when we were designing this, we thought, do we focus in on one task, so like heartbeat detection or breathing, or do we go broad? And we decided to go broad. So throughout the 8 weeks, we gave them a kind of pick and mix library to work from, ranging from simple, just getting used to the idea of tuning into their body and noticing the difference between paying attention to thoughts, their body, and extraceptive senses. And then sort of some very well-known body scans and progressive muscle relaxation, and also resonant breathing. So they got a chance to sample each of these. And the importance for these that we emphasized here is that the words and the ideas weren't that important. It was more their experience that was important when it came to the experiential exercises, rather than trying to get it right. The other thing that was kind of offered to them was this idea of a journey of noticing, exploring, influencing, and then enjoying it. So for some people, just noticing was a big step for them. And then beginning to explore the difference between, the intensity or the location of bodily signals before going on to something like breathing, visualization to influence how they feel, and then finally integrating that with everyday life was the final step. And the self-reflection questions, they kind of, we didn't explain it as coaching, but they were sort of really the journey was, they chose, it was self-led, you know, at the beginning of the 7 weeks, had what attracted them to take part on this research project, just to get them sort of focused on their purpose for being here. And then as we moved towards the end of the 8 weeks, it was more kind of starting to think, how would they like to feel in the future? So the selection criteria and eligibility, it was really any adults who were in good health. We excluded people who were taking medication for mental health. We actually, because of sort of the network I'm involved in, about 50% of the participants were experiencing persistent pain. So what some of the other people have been talking here about, hypermobility and the difficulty of using light meters for detecting pulse in their fingers. You know, we came across those difficulties as well. What we measured, so MAI was one of the scales, then perceived stress, a mental well-being scale, and heart rate variability, and also asked participants to estimate every week how much time they spent tuning into their body in minutes. So we had over 120 people register at the start. I think nearly 90 completed the study, but we got complete sort of tidy data for 65. And the results, so pre to post, there was a significant increase for 7 of the 8 subscales in the MAA, and also for the well-being, significant increase, and there were strong, medium to strong effect sizes for all of those. Non-significant was the perceived stress scale, HRV, which there was lots of sort of difficulties and faults with trying to do it with a free app on a mobile phone. So we don't know how, you know, meaningful that result was. And also the non-worrying scale on MAIA. And I've got some sort of interesting ideas about why that might have been. And when it came to the amount of time tuning in, so what was quite interesting, I'd like to explore more, is this kind of, when you ask people to look at how much time they spent tuning in, and was there a correlation between, you know, the amount of time they spent tuning into their body and their increase in body awareness in terms of MAIA. So looking at the dosage, and could we find perhaps an optimal dose? So it was a very kind of basic study. We're a limited budget and time, but it's led to some other sort of interesting questions. So thank you very much. What I wanted to suggest is, I'm calling it a sort of green light brainstorm, and you may be familiar with this type of brainstorming, but basically what it means is that during this session, the next few minutes, we've got maybe 15 minutes for this session, is anything goes. So we don't have to hold back with thinking it's a silly idea, and there's no kind of criticizing the idea at this stage. We can criticize at the next stage. It's just anything goes. I'll try and take some notes, and the points I thought we could work from are reflections. So what intrigued you the most about the 6 presentations you just heard? What you think might have been missing? So gaps and opportunities. What would you like to add through your research based on what we've heard?
Just quickly say first, very sorry for showing up late, but again, the time zone, I screwed it up today. Today was my fault. And I checked 15 times, but I still screwed it up. I'm sorry.
No problem, Alexandra. And there is a recording. So we'll send you the recording.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, I can start. Just one of the things that really intrigued me was that we're seeing these really promising effects across this wide variety of populations and even ages, which I think is really exciting, from kids to adults, military to, folks with different kinds of mental health, physical conditions. So, I think just it's that to me was very promising. It's hard for me to think of, other types of therapies that, we would maybe see such promising effects across such a broad array of populations.
Great, thank you. So what other types of therapies would have such broad range effects? As in, challenging other therapies to match that broad ranging effect. So possibly it's something quite fundamental. The intervention is working at a fundamental level, potentially.
I will go next if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Can you all hear me? Yeah. Okay, so I think what I noticed that it's all very geared towards positive emotions and body sensations. And there is this concept of body collaboration by Vicki Bellman, which I don't think is very famous yet, but I think it's very helpful in that it kind of invites all of the parts that we have, negative, positive, whatever they may be, to the table, and then see what they have to bring to the table, what their function is, what they might be able to tell us, and then integrate them all in a way that is good for us. So I, for example, I don't think I'm a very positive person, but that's okay. That's just me. And I think kind of a broader focus of whatever the individual goal is would be a nice way to kind of tailor it.
So what the individual, so rather than prescribing a goal for the person, it's individualized to whatever they want to achieve. Is that what you're saying? And
yeah.
Sort of not necessarily judging a feeling because it might be labeled a certain way.
Can I add to that? Mm-hmm. I don't want to derail the conversation too far, but I'm on the far extreme. I do not believe there are any positive or negative emotions, honestly. But I don't want to derail things. Like even gratitude, which I use every day in the clinic. In the case of, Stockholm syndrome, is gratitude improve survivability? Well, yeah, but what if the door is unlocked and it's open? So gratitude may not be. So somebody has to judge what is positive and negative. So I only believe that either emotions are either they help you adapt or they don't. Fear helps you adapt sometimes. Most of the time it's not. And gratitude helps you adapt, helps us adapt together. And then to always remember that fear is high energy, poorly efficient. And so I'm on the far extreme of believing or buying in Vicki Bellman. I don't know who that is, but so I only discuss, is this emotion useful in where you want to go and what you want to do?
Mm.
As a very basic researcher, I mean, how we see that is that, so I work with mice, I don't work with humans. And so I feel, for me, emotions are always something super like basic, right? There are basic emotions that are usually always there, that have developed across species to guide behaviors and to help behaviors. And maybe the interpretation of good and bad, we can discuss about that, but I would absolutely argue that emotions are there to adapt our behavior in some ways. And of course, there are, if they go to an extreme, they're still there to adapt something because you see like a mismatch in whatever is happening to you. And of course, it could lead to some psychiatric diseases, but I absolutely believe they are there for adaptation.
Mm-hmm.
No?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah. Any other thoughts on that? I would agree. I didn't sort of say it, but we had a big sort of emphasis on our course on not judging or labeling to start off with, just noticing and also explaining about this. They have a purpose, and they just not wanting to get stuck maybe in something for too long if it's unhelpful or maladaptive. Yeah. I was listening earlier today to Mark Miller talk with a guy called John Vervaeke, some of you may have heard of, with his ecologies of practice. And he was also sort of saying that happiness is a prediction error, really. That's when we things are working out better than we expect. So, and it might not be adaptive to be stuck in happiness forever. It's just an interesting thought.
That's interesting, yeah.
Can I throw an opinion on that?
Yes, please do.
I actually don't have my patients try to seek happiness. I try and have them seek alignment in their life to get themselves in a better physiological state. And when they make the decision to align their life and the skills to adapt, that happiness will find them. That's my
Okay, great. We're getting their life and their day-to-day activities tracking with how they're feeling in a useful way. Yeah. Nice principle.
I had a couple of technical questions, if that was okay, moving away from emotion. Kelly, in terms of the curriculum requiring about 20 sessions, do you have any work on the dosing, so to speak? What seems to be the minimum to get an effect? Or is that not something that you have a sense of? Because it seems like a really excellent program. And obviously I've been in one of your talks before, but 20 sessions is I can see how this might work in schools, but thinking for adults, that seems quite a formidable amount.
Yeah, it's a good question, and we don't have clear data yet to find that magic sweet spot. The study I did present on was an 8-week condensed version, so we didn't get through all 25 lessons, and we still had statistically significant gains. And we have also done other studies where we did all 25 lessons. So all of our studies have had statistically significant gains. So we do need to start playing around. And when I listen to, your work, and I just think maybe, and I think we talked about this, in a past meeting together, am I overcomplicating it? Teaching kids to check in and notice with 15 different body parts when maybe all they need to do is focus on their heart or their breathing, or, and still have a generalized overall improvement in their interoceptive clarity. So, maybe I'm answering your question with a question. I don't know.
That's absolutely fine. No, but of course, and I'm sure there must be some kind of middle ground. I'm just thinking about practicability and feasibility, but I really like the idea of starting off with the hands and the feet, the ones that are kind of easier to. I also had a little question for Ian, actually. You mentioned that you had the same difficulties with hypermobile people with the sensors, and I wondered what heart rate variability app you were trying to use.
I'm struggling. It's on the tip of my tongue. I was trying to think of it earlier, and I can't remember. It was we tested a few different free downloadable apps, and I think I've deleted it off my phone now. But it was one that was relatively newly launched, and the name's gone. But basically, the challenge was that on different devices, so Apple versus iPhone and different versions, it had slightly different performance. And so even the instructions, we gave out video instructions on how to use it, but it seemed to perform differently depending on the cameras, the phone's camera and so on. But yeah, certainly, not just hypermobility, but people with Raynaud's and POTS and all sorts of things, then, you know, it was certainly those people who had more questions and were struggling to get reliable readings.
Yeah, no, and it's also COVID has apparently highlighted that this is an issue for people with dark as well, and it's not just to do with circulation issues, because we tried everything, you know, foot, hand, ear, any available body part, but yeah, these sensor issues are a problem for people trying to do heart rate measurements.
Ron, I know you've used Leaf. Is it Leaf or something which is stuck onto your chest? Have you done any more with that?
So a couple things. Light sensors, PPG. There are limitations, and you have to be careful with movement artifact and heart rate variability. ECG is the best. So none of the PPG monitors are approved for medical grade use. So the Leaf, which I'm an advisor for, so there's a disclosure, is a wearable ECG patch to practice heart rate variability biofeedback during the day. Put it on each day. So a little reminder about ECG. You know, EEG is microvolts. Heart rate is millivolts. So it's an order of magnitude of 10 larger electrical signal. And I also do EMGs, and that's putting a needle in, say, the quadriceps. And to see an individual motor unit in the quadriceps, you have to use a needle. Why can you use a surface electrode with the heart? It's because it's one motor unit. So it's an order of magnitude larger electrical signal than any other signal in the body. And that's why I think it's a great starting place if you're going to do a dozen different interoceptive skills, right, Kelly? A good place to get an early win is with heart rate, because it's this enormous electrical signal compared to everything else. And so ECG is an ideal way to do it.
It's interesting because clinically, outside of our research, I don't have any formal data on this, but the heart rate is one of the hardest body parts for a lot of our participants to mindfully notice. Do you have any thoughts on that? That's why we started with outside body parts, but I don't, you know.
I'm a broken record. I'm passionate about heart rate variability biofeedback. Why? I'm not saying it's better than anything. I do think it's the starting point. So if you have an ECG monitor and you want to increase awareness, they're training wheels to meditation, they're training wheels to interceptive training. I personally think it's a fundamental starting point for all these different processes, would be an ECG heart, in which, you know, that's why I advise this particular company, no others.
I actually have some thoughts and questions, if that's okay. Which is that I don't know. I'm quite interested in very broad aspects of interoception. So I've done psychometric work, behavioural work, and also electrophysiological work as well. But for me, what's really interesting is this centrality of the heart and its use as a sort of like general indicator of interoceptive awareness. When I think most of us are more in tune perhaps with gastric signals or signals of like feeling like need to go into the toilet on a day-to-day basis. These are signals that we're probably, you know, more aware of, and particularly in some fields. So for example, in my work in body image and in eating disorders, I think some other domains can be more relevant perhaps. So I don't know, I just find it really interesting that there still is really a pervasive focus on the cardiac, perhaps because it is the easiest to measure, and I think that's what we've seen, you know, in a lot of the outcome measures in the studies that were presented here. But you know, there have been a lot of questions about validity of some of these measures. I mean, I'm using a cardiac measure myself, so it's kind of a related point or discussion that I wanted to bring up, is that we're also using a heartbeat discrimination app. Developed, I'm collaborating with Jeffrey Bird and David Plans on the paper they published. So we're using that to measure interoceptive accuracy in a fibromyalgia sample. And it's interesting to see all of the challenges that you're facing because, validating it in this sample is also proving tricky. Not least because just the use of the technology, I found, particularly in an older age range, it was I really had to develop like video instructions just to help them like download the app and use the app and things like that. So that was a really interesting challenge, trying to measure interoception on a distance basis. Sorry, I've sort of jumped around quite a lot there, but it's just the conversation's going in a few different directions.
Yeah. So it really does seem like a balance between, the cost and people needing to come into a lab and versus wanting to get a larger study group and make it accessible and be able to do it at home at any time, and the benefits of that real life kind of data collection. Sorry, Ron, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I want to fully support what you just said. That is my absolute weakness, and was one of the things I want any advice from you about gastrointestinal system. I actually have disappointed. I have even a case report where I had a lady who was able to mitigate her heart arrhythmias. She was so good at the heart rate variability, and I just expected it would start to unravel some of the GI stuff on its own. And now she's now 5 years out without any heart arrhythmias, with the skill to modulate her heart, but yet she continues to have gastrointestinal issues. And I just assumed that it would be like a domino effect and it would improve, and it has. So absolutely, my POTS patients, I can get them better with heart interoception, and they still struggle with gastrointestinal symptoms.
Yeah, just to jump in, I mean, this is something I think a lot about with my work on eating disorders and individuals struggling with suicidal ideation and behavior. And Jennifer, we've published a study where we compared self-reported interoception via the MAIA, cardiac accuracy via the heartbeat perception test, and then a pain perception test that we developed, but it was modeled on the heartbeat perception test. And we actually found the strongest associations between suicidal behavior and pain perception, perhaps not surprisingly. And that individuals with suicide histories had worse pain perception than those without. And then there were no differences in terms of cardiac accuracy. So obviously a lot more work needs to be done in that. But, we also, I think it too about the gastrointestinal sensations with eating disorder patients and, how mismatched those can be with, perhaps what they're actually eating. But Ron, in terms of, I'm trying to send it via chat. You all may have seen it. Sahib Khalsa actually wrote a new article sharing a bunch of different ways to assess gastrointestinal interoception. Unfortunately, at least for me, I think not maybe the most easy assessments to use in the lab, but let me try to figure out how to share this paper with you all as well, at least to look at later.
Is it that you can't see the chat function? Is that
I can. Normally I can just drop an article in there, but for some reason it's not letting me drop an article in there. So, but it looks like it's going to let me if I sign into my Dropbox. So I'll do that.
Okay, good. Thank you. So what I wanted to also, thanks Jessica as well, the correct spelling of Vicky Bellman. I'll add that to the notes. So just reading back through the notes, we had April commenting that there were, what seemed to stand out was that the effects seem to go across many different ages and conditions. And then the question of what other types of interventions have such broad-ranging effects. And then Lisa commenting that, there seemed to be a strong agreement that to move away from labeling emotions as either good or bad, and focusing instead on, understanding whether the feelings are helpful to a person's overall life. And then we moved on to talking about the difficulties of measuring objectively, and there was some technical questions about dosing, and Ron sort of suggesting that ECG is much more reliable than PPG. And then we talked about, the different channels and locations. So the heart seems to be an obvious one to focus on for various reasons. But other kind of oscillators in the body, maybe gastric functions, are less easy to study. So any more thoughts on that? Oh, welcome. We've got someone else has joined us. Shruti, hi. I'm not sure where which lab you're from.
I'm April's student.
Oh, welcome. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, I'll share just a thought kind of related to what we were talking about. I think for me, a future direction that I'm really interested in going into is this idea of, again, potentially understanding what interoceptive deficits are maybe most pronounced in certain disorders, and, trying to think about matching some of our treatments to that. And then even, perhaps further personalizing the treatment. If you could do some kind of assessment, Kelly, I'm really interested in looking at your materials more, but, a really thorough assessment, and find out maybe where the deficits are greater and kind of build the intervention in accordance with that, so that you can ideally be making the smartest intervention, the one that's going to take the least amount of time and be the most potent for a given individual. But I think there's many, many steps that need to happen perhaps before we get there.
Maybe I also want to add another thought, also in a different direction. But I wondered how we can, because in basic research, there's also a huge trend now, let's call it, to study interoception and to really study the circuits, the hardcore circuits, the neurons and the brain regions that are involved. And I just wondered how fast and how effectively this can be translated. And I just wanted to hear thoughts about that, because of course we will understand nitty-gritty details at some point, hopefully, about signaling from the heart to the brain works and what effects there are. And I just wondered how much in your research you really look at basic research and how much this can inform you.
So translated to, you mean amongst other academics, or more for the general public and lay person?
I meant more to actual patients and to the clinics, and then also ultimately to the lay persons. So, and I just wondered how much people who do work with patients and humans in general, how much they really use the basic research knowledge that's popping up out everywhere now.
Mm-hmm. Any
I can
thoughts?
speak to that. That's where my passion is taking all of your amazing research and trying my best to translate it as an occupational therapist and really getting the word out there about interoception. I would say that the general population knows a lot more about interoception in the last few years, but we still have a long way to go. I'm really working in pediatrics in the school systems to really affect a change and to have a more interoceptive focused approach rather than compliance, which derails the interoceptive experience. So we're making slow gains, but the translation is definitely hard work. It's really hard work.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Your research is making a huge impact, how it is informing how we're supporting different types of clients is it's just driving so many more successful outcomes.
Cool. Well, That's awesome to hear. Cool, great. I'm sad I missed your presentation, by the way, but I will definitely have a look back.
Yeah, and please, if anyone's not aware of Alex's work with mice, it's fascinating stuff. And I'll, if everyone's happy, I'll just share the email addresses from everyone who's participated. If you've got an objection to that, just email me. And otherwise, you're welcome to make contact with each other that way after the meeting. Great. Well, we're coming up to the 2 hours. I'd like to thank you all very much for your time. I know it's it's not been an optimal time of day for everybody, but trying to match all these different time zones was a bit of a challenge. And I'm aware some of you have been traveling. There were some people who are traveling and haven't been able to make it. So it's really grateful that you've carved out a window to join this conversation.
I just want to say thank you. This was so exciting to put some faces to some names. I've followed much of your work and amazing research. I'm just like more energized now than ever. And Ian, thanks again. And I would love if hopefully this could become a more regular kind of meeting.
Mm-hmm. That's also what I just wanted to say. So if this is a thing that will continue in the future, because I think we can all really benefit from that a lot.
Certainly, I'm happy to coordinate that. What would you think would be a sort of a useful frequency? Twice a year, or less, or more often?
Given how slow the scientific enterprise is, I would say once or twice a year, perhaps. Yeah. But yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think this could be a good time frame.
Mm-hmm. Thank you all so much. And I'll be hanging around for a few more minutes. Otherwise, I hope you all have an enjoyable rest of your day, and I hope to hear from you all soon.
Thanks, Ian. This was awesome. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for organizing, and sorry again for showing up late. That was totally on me. Yeah.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Nice to meet you all.